Senator Paul, without further ado, I'm going to ask you to join me.
Thank you. This podium is too enormous to stand behind. So I'm going to come around to the side so you can actually see me, and I'll pick some vegetables around here. So John Dennis is not here, so I can tell you what happened on the golf course today. I tried to let him win. I tried to let him keep up, but he was like, he was doing his hair. He was worried about being on TV. So, we wish him luck. But, this whole Antifa thing, I mean, how many people have seen the video with John Dennis? It's amazing and it's gone viral, but at the same time, it's amazing and alarming. I rode over here on the plane from Denver to Sacramento. And there was a guy muttering, "You fascist, you this and that," and all this stuff. But he was just sort of this really angry person. And then he got up and left by saying, that he wished that I were assaulted again. I had my ribs broken. And it's like, he said it in more colorful terms, but it's like, really? I don't wish harm on the other side. I'm here with Nancy Pelosi. If she was here, I'd give her an earful of things she could be for, but in a nice way. We see these people all the time. We're not yelling and screaming at each other. The only people yelling and screaming at each other are on Twitter or Facebook, and they're mostly on the left. But it's still all Donald Trump's fault, right? Everything is Donald Trump's fault, but the only people in restaurants having their food taken from them, the only people in restaurants having people yelling and screaming in their face, and believe me, it is unsettling to be in a restaurant, have people come up this way. We've had it, Kelly and I in California have had this. We had this in New York. Let's see, California and New York. What do they have in common? But people who say that politics used to be completely civil are also wrong. So I come from the state where Henry Clay is probably our most famous elected official. He was elected in 1810. In his first time in election, he was elected to the House of Representatives. He became Speaker of the House in his first term. One person ever to do that. I mean, typically now you got to wait 30 or 40 years like Nancy Pelosi. And then you get to be Speaker, but he got to be Speaker in his first term, which was remarkable. So he then joined the Senate and went back and forth, but he was actually a senator from 1810 to 1850. Well, there was this guy that he didn't get along with named John Roanoke John Randolph of Roanoke, Virginia. And John Randolph had these two big dogs, and he would bring them on the floor of the house. And it's like, really? They had dogs on the floor of the house? They really did. And these aren't like, I don't think they were like Labradoodles. I think they're maybe those dogs from the Game of Thrones. Remember those dogs? That's what I'm picturing, okay? So these were angry dogs. And one time, John Randolph of Roanoke says, somebody came up to him from North Carolina and said, "Get those damn dogs over here off the floor." And he hit him with his cane and an altercation occurred. So, I mean, we have had violent times. Charles Sumner was an abolitionist, a great Republican, and one of the heroic Republicans who were called the Radical Republicans. He was beaten and probably severely injured. He didn't come back for 2 years by a Democrat from South Carolina. So we have had violence in the past. But one of my favorite stories about John Randolph of Roanoke and Henry Clay is Henry Clay gets elected and he says, "We're going to get rid of those dogs." So he calls the sergeant at arms, and in those days the sergeant at arms actually had arms, and he says, "Take those dogs and get them off the floor." He takes the dogs and gets them off the floor. So John Randolph of Roanoke was standing outside the chambers, and as Henry Clay comes out of the chambers, John Randolph of Roanoke bows up his chest and he says, "I never sidestep a skunk." And Henry Clay very deftly walked around him and said, "I always do." Nevertheless, even though we have had contention, we have had brawling back and forth, it still isn't a good thing. And I will tell you that there's actually less of it in Washington than there is among these Antifa crazies and people doing this stuff on university campuses and punching people in the arms. It exists. But really in Washington, it's actually a little less than that. Look, I have Democrats who I've worked with Bernie Sanders on some things, a few things. Yeah, I'm not for like some of the major things like socialism, but so we check off, we have to sort of not talk about socialism, but you know, I've worked with him on some issues. I've worked with Cory Booker on some issues. I've worked with Kirsten Gillibrand on sexual assault in the military. I mean, there are issues where there is overlap and we can find common ground. But the bottom line is we're usually not yelling and screaming at each other. I don't know how we devolved into this. And I think some of it's that the media, you know, I guess controversy sells. You know, it's sort of like the old journalism of the newspaper asking you about something terrible in order for you to buy the newspaper. A little bit of it's that, but it isn't accurate. I mean, really, it is more civil in Washington. Now, we have some disagreements. For example, on taxes, we want them lower, they want them higher. But it's hard to find a compromise. And they'll say, well, we'll make them lower for people who make less than $50,000 as long as you'll increase it several points for those who are the top 1%. And we say, well, people below $50,000 don't pay any income tax. And it's like, how are we going to make it below zero? And actually, to tell you the truth, it is below zero. Because the earned income tax credit gives back $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 for a lot of families that they didn't pay in taxes. There's also about a 25% fraud rate in the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit. So there are a lot of problems. But the thing is that there's a huge lie sort of lurking out there. And this huge lie is that the rich are not paying enough and the poor are paying too much. But the facts are absolutely incontrovertible. Those making less than $50,000 don't pay any income tax, or very little. So I made the mistake of going on The View. My advice, if you're asked to go on The View, don't. But we were selling this book that Tony and I wrote, The Case Against Socialism, and I go on there, and I said exactly that most people under $50,000 don't pay income tax. You can do the math, it's pretty simple. The standard deduction, I think, is $12,000 now. If it's a husband, wife, and 2 kids, you're at $50,000 in deductions. You really don't pay much in income tax. And we said that on, has that gotten really loud? We said that on The View, and they went crazy, just yelling and screaming. And it's like, ostensibly, some of them are supposed to be Republican and some are supposed to be Democrat, but they were all yelling at me. And you try to yell back at them, but it doesn't do any good. And so one of the worst is this, she's ostensibly the Republican, one of the Republicans, Anna Navarro. Well, she hates Trump, she hates me, and I don't know what Republican she likes. And so she's yelling and screaming, and I'm talking about socialism in Venezuela. I'm talking about how it's gotten so bad that they're eating their pets. They have more oil underground than Saudi Arabia, but it's an enormous disaster. And I'm talking about how socialism is failing in Venezuela. And she keeps interrupting me saying, no, it's not socialism. They're murderers and thugs. And I said, no. They are socialists and they're murderers and thugs. But she was insistent that it was one or the other. And the thing is we can't let them get away with it. We can't let them get away with this notion that they're going to promote this kinder, gentler socialism. You know, it's going to be democratic and you're going to love it. Just give them a chance. The problem is that socialism, and most of us know this, if you've studied any history of the last 100 years, every time it devolves into violence. Every time there's a politically motivated famine that occurs, starvation has occurred. But it isn't benign, has never been benign. Even in the times when it's been introduced through an election, there's usually one election, and that's the last election. But they're dressing it up, and it's extraordinary that they're actually running on this. When I was a kid, in the 1970s, late 1970s, they were embarrassed to be called liberals. They started calling themselves progressives. But now, they're brazen. They're out there, and they're telling you that they're socialists, they want to bring socialism. So we've got to combat it. So Kelly and I decided to write this book because when you do surveys of young people, over half of young people actually are open to the idea of socialism. I mean, you ask them about socialism, they're like, yeah, we should try it. Maybe we should experiment with socialism. The only good news is if you ask them the second question, what is socialism? Almost none of them know what socialism is. What they're for is what they've been force-fed in the government schools. They've been force-fed this idea that if Johnny's not very fast, we should still give him a trophy for track. If Susie can't spell, we should still pass her along and say she's a great student because we need to make sure she has self-esteem. It's not about merit, it's not about success, it's not about teaching people that the only self-esteem you ever have you get from work. That doesn't mean everybody's going to be a stable genius like the president. Not everybody can be that. But there's all different levels. We've all got a place, you know? But the thing is you get your self-esteem through work. Nobody can give you your self-esteem. And I don't care whether you are serving the food, cleaning this place, or whether you're a rocket scientist, you get your self-esteem from work. The other side doesn't get that. And they want to give it away for free. And in the schools, they've been saying, you need justice and fairness. And so these kids come out and have no clue as to how their parents earned enough money to buy their clothes and send them to school to do all this. They just say, well, at school they teach me about fairness. And the only way to be fair is maybe the government should make us fair. Maybe the government should try to make us equal in outcome. And this is one of the points that we make in the book, is that if you want equal outcome, you actually have to treat people unequally. And I think this is part of the answer as to what we should talk about with kids. Kids don't care about balanced budgets or taxes. You pay for all their expenses, and they don't make any money, so they don't pay any taxes for a while. So at a young age, they just don't care about this, but they do care about sort of the idea of fairness or justice. So here's something that I think we should try to remind them about socialism. If I give you all $1,000, and you leave and you come back in 10 minutes, some of you will already have traded some of your money for something else, and you'll come back with a different amount. If you come back in a week or a month, some of you have 10,000, some of you have no money. It'll be distributed because people obey trades. Some people have been better at trading. Some people had a great idea, and more people gave their money to that person, but the money won't be equally distributed. But if you want an equal outcome, if you want everybody to have an equal income, and everybody's going to have an equal outcome, you have to treat people unequally. So it sort of goes against what we think of when we think of, well, equal protection under the law. What does that mean? It means everybody's treated equally, no matter the color of your skin, your gender, what you do with your life. Everybody's treated the same under the law. We agree with that. But under socialism, in order to make everybody equal in the end, you actually don't treat people equally under the law. You have to treat some people more severely under the law. The other thing they need to remember and they need to explain is that time and time again, socialism in the last century wound up with violence, with dictatorship, with gulag, with Holocaust, you name it. You know, look at how history is rewritten. You know, how many of these kids know that Hitler was a socialist? Almost none of them. And the media will say, oh no, he wasn't really a socialist, he was a fascist, and that's what happens when you get too much capitalism, you get fascism. Well, that is ridiculous. His party was called the National Socialist Party. He was proud of it. All he did different was he hated Jewish people. So he took that hatred, and the Bolsheviks had many Jewish people in their socialism, so he said, I got this new socialism where we're going to hate the Jews also, and kill the Jews. It was still socialism. Everything about it was. But then they turned it topsy-turvy. Hitler wasn't a Jew. It wasn't a socialist. Stalin. They said, well, we want socialism. We want Bernie's socialism or Sweden's socialism, but we don't want the Gulag and we don't want Stalin, so we're not really for that. You ask the kids about Mao, they have no idea who Mao was. But the thing is, tens of millions of people died when the government collectivized the farms. I have a good friend who's an ophthalmologist in Nashville. He was there for the Cultural Revolution when they shut down all of the colleges. He used to play a fiddle on the street, dance on the streets to try to keep away from the government and the oppression of the government. We need to know our history or we're doomed to repeat it. Their number one argument, though, you know this, because all you got to do is watch The View. On The View, they'll tell you that what we really want is the socialism of Sweden. If we just have Swedish socialism, you're all going to be happy. We're going to give you so much free stuff. You won't have to work. You won't have to pay taxes. And the rich people are going to pay for all of it. It turns out that none of that is true. Absolutely not one word of it is true. In fact, if you look at Scandinavia, Kelly looked at a lot of this in our book and did a lot of interviews. When you look at Scandinavia, guess what? The working class pays higher taxes than our working class. They pay a 25% VAT or sales tax on everything. Food, clothing, you name it. Cars, 100% tax on cars. Why they ride bikes? Not because they're so happy to ride the bike in minus 30 degrees. They're riding because the cars are so damn expensive they can't afford it. When you look at Scandinavia, it brings to life a lie that Bernie Sanders is selling. It isn't the top 1% that is paying for all the goodies in Scandinavia. The working class, 25% sales tax on everything, 60% income tax starting at $60,000. It's an enormous amount of taxes, but it's also not socialism. Do you know when Sweden tried socialism and was going way in that direction? In the 1970s. They've been coming back ever since. You know, what Bernie wants is he wants a wealth redistribution, like a 54% redistribution of all wealth. You know, they tried that in Sweden and Scandinavia 20 years ago. They don't do it now. So everything he says he wants about Sweden, they tried and gave up years and decades ago. They've been coming towards us the whole time. Bernie voted against lowering the corporate income tax. One of the best things we did with President Trump and a Republican Congress is we lowered the corporate income tax from 35% to 21%. But the interesting thing is when we got to 21%, we got to where Sweden and Scandinavia are. So they don't have high corporate taxes. So Bernie's like, we gotta be like Sweden, we gotta be like Sweden. And it's like, well, Sweden has low corporate taxes, not high corporate taxes. What do you want? The top 1% don't pay for everything, everybody else pays for everything. So this is a big lie. Why is it important? Because politically it's demagoguery. It's trying to tell you can have a lot of free stuff. You can have free college, and you can have free paid leave for all of these people, and you don't have to pay for it. Just the rich people are going to pay for it. All right, there are a few of you here who probably are the top 1%. But the thing is, it doesn't work. So when AOC says she's going to tax those making $10 million or more, 70% tax. Did I hear a boo for AOC? Anybody else? So she's going to tax them 70%. Guess how much money it brings in? $50 billion. And you're like, well, that's a lot of money, right? Well, they want to spend $50 trillion. There's a math problem here, see? We need to combat this, though. And it's very important because if they win these arguments that we're going to do a benign, a kinder sort of socialism, that's what we're going to get. And it won't be benign when we finally get it. How are we doing? How are we doing when we have Republicans? We're all Republicans here. We want more Republicans. We want to send or bring Nancy Pelosi back home. Well, be nice to her, right? We won't attack her in the restaurant. So we're so glad you're home, Nancy. We're so glad that you're home to stay. But the thing is that how are we doing as Republicans overall? What's the grade? So my dad was on before me and Jesse Waters the other night. My dad gave the president a C- but a B+ for effort. And so Jesse Waters, like your dad, why is he saying that? And I was like, well, he's a hard grader. I grew up in that household. He's a hard grader. My grading's actually a little softer than that. I think we've done great things with the courts and the judges. We've approved more judges. We've approved more judges than Obama did in 8 years. So I was playing golf with the president, and I played several times with him, but this was a couple years ago after Gorsuch got appointed. And I think Gorsuch is actually the best. I used to think Thomas was the best. I still like Thomas. I think Gorsuch is now the most liberal president. So he had just appointed Gorsuch, and I looked at him, and I rode out there with him in the motorcade, so we had quite a long time to talk. And I said, well, Mr. President, I think you could possibly get 3 justices. You know what he did? He looked at me and he said, that in a nutshell is President Trump. He does not lack He does not have an excessive amount of humility. He does not lack in candor. He is not afraid to say what's on his mind. And that's why his rallies are extraordinary. You know, we all want to think we're great, and, you know, all that. He gets 25,000 people to show up. So I was at the rally the other night in New Hampshire, 25,000 people, and they get statistics because you have to sign up online to get the tickets. I think it was 7% had never voted before. This is how he's winning. This is how he won Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Ohio. We haven't won it in 30 or 40 years. 7% are showing up at the rallies they never voted for. So there are people motivated because I guess they're just tired of the political correctness and the nonsense, and they just want someone to speak truth. 20% of the people showing up at the rallies are Democrats, registered Democrats. So this is a good thing. The rallies are exciting, but on Monday night after the rally, we did have to have a very somber occasion. We flew back and we stopped at Dover Air Force Base for 2 of our fallen soldiers. And, you know, Kelly and our family, we have a lot of family members that serve. Kelly has 3 nephews who have served in recent years. One of them's been in since 9/11 and is now a commander of the Navy. Her father was in for 20 years. My dad was in for 5 years. Her 2 brothers were in. One brother was Air Force Academy. So we know about the military. Kelly grew up in the military and traveled the world. She lived for a while in Turkey. She was born in Homestead Air Force Base. We know what it's like. But we also know what it's like when you lose your friends and your comrades. And it does happen. But it should never happen when we don't have a mission. We have not had a mission in 10 years in Afghanistan, and I think it's time to come home. And I think the president agrees with me. I mean, he's made that position at least open that people can talk about it. Not everybody agrees, but the thing is, we ought to at least think about it. I mean, the Constitution was very clear. You look at all the arguments of all the founding fathers, every one of them said, we only go to war when Congress declares war. We didn't want to give that power to one man or one woman or anybody. It was supposed to be divided. So the only time we would go to war was when Congress voted for it. Madison, who's considered to be the father of the Constitution, said, the executive is the branch most prone to war. Therefore, the Constitution, with studied care, vested that power in the legislature. Every one of our founding fathers, Hamilton, Washington, they all said the same thing. But we've gravitated away from that. And I think as a consequence, what we've ended up with is sometimes we haven't been united as a people. But the opposite argument is, oh, Congress is so terrible and so feckless, they would never get it done, they would never declare war. But the opposite, I think, is true. When we were attacked at Pearl Harbor, FDR, and I'm not an FDR fan at all, but he came to Congress and he did the right thing. He came before a joint session of Congress and he said, we've been attacked. We're going to declare war on Japan. Even then, they didn't declare immediately on Germany. They declared on Japan. Everybody voted for it. I think there was maybe one dissenting view. When we were attacked on 9/11, everybody, virtually everybody, maybe one vote against it. We were united. And I think we had purpose, and we did the right thing after 9/11, going after the people who attacked us. But we cannot be at war forever. The president last year in his State of the Union said, great nations don't fight perpetual war. I couldn't agree more. If we look at the expenses of war, it's not only in the lives lost, there's an amazing amount of money. We're up to about $1 trillion in Afghanistan, and we are spending about $50 billion a year. And you say, well, if it's for war, we got to do it. Well, I'll tell you some of the things we're spending money on in Afghanistan. We spent $90 million on a deluxe hotel, a luxury hotel across from the embassy in Kabul. Guess what? The contractor ran off with the money. It's a shell of a building. It's completely open, and it's a danger to our soldiers. Our soldiers have to patrol it because snipers can shoot down at our embassy. We're going to have to actually, in fact, tonight I was told to ask you for an extra $1,000. John Dennis said I could do this. He said, ask you for an extra $1,000 a piece so we can tear the hotel down. I'm kidding. I I'm making that part up, but the hotel's real. It is there in Kabul. We spent $45 million on a natural gas station. I could see that in San Francisco or something, right? That sounds like a foolish idea that people in California do, right? Why? Because no one has a car that runs on natural gas. Now, there might be some people that have designed one, but there's no mass market car that runs on natural gas. In Afghanistan, the average income is $800 a year. About 1 in 500 people have a car that don't run on natural gas. So somebody told the military that their mission is to go green. We're supposed to reduce the carbon footprint of Afghanistan. A country that cooks their food on open fires, we're going to reduce their carbon footprint by making them a natural gas station. It was supposed to cost $500,000. It had 80 times cost overruns and cost like 45 or 46 million. My staff was there to look at it and to look at some of the waste. The military said we can't take you there because we'd have to risk, 2 gunships and 60 warriors to go out to see it. So we're building crap you can't even go see because it's too dangerous to see. After 20 years, you cannot ride around in Kabul in a car. You got to go by helicopter. It's a complete and utter mess. So I did a hearing last week on the Afghan papers. The Afghan papers is all these generals who have given their opinion over decades. Generals, lieutenant colonels saying there's just not a mission. But if there's not a mission, we shouldn't send anybody else. I mean, it's time to make that decision. We should always defend our country, but it's time that we bring the troops home. Sometimes conservatives and Republicans, maybe we're too dour, maybe we're always talking about balancing budgets and it never gets balanced, and then debt's so high and we feel like everything is so terrible about the world. I think it's important that we as Republicans and conservatives and those who believe in limited government actually see the world as it is and understand some of the good things that are happening. There's a great website called humanprogress.org, and I highly suggest looking at it. Cato does this. A guy named Martin Tupy does this. In it, he looks at poverty statistics. In 1820, sort of the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, 90% of the world lived in extreme poverty. This is less than $2 a day, and this is the way World Bank defines extreme poverty. Keeping those constant dollars, and you look at it, when I was born in the early 1960s, it had gone from 90% poverty down to about a third of the world. This isn't just the U.S., it's the entire world. Down to about a third. You know where it is now? Less than 10% of the world lives in extreme poverty. Great things are happening. Last 100 years, we've doubled longevity. Through antibiotics and vaccines, people are living longer, and infant mortality and child mortality has plummeted. There's so much good going on. Even looking at what the average worker does to buy a refrigerator, in the 1950s, it took 150 hours of an average worker's pay to buy a refrigerator. It takes about 10 hours now. Food, you can buy 7 times as much food as you could 100 years ago. So I was trying to give this optimism on Trevor Noah one time. And Trevor looked at me and said, oh yeah, that's right, food's down and there's great productivity and technology and all that, but what about healthcare and education? And I said, well, what do you think's in common to both of those? The government. So where the government has not been, where you have a true marketplace, things go down. Competition really works. Productivity works. Division of labor works. Everything Adam Smith talked about works. But it doesn't work when the government gets involved. But I think we shouldn't forget, as Republicans, as descendants of a party that was expanded and made dominant by Ronald Reagan, his enthusiasm, our enthusiasm for the origin of our country, but also our enthusiasm for the great wealth that is created by freedom, by being left alone. We are the party to be left alone. So I wish you the best. I want you to grow. I want Republicans to be on the ascendancy in California again. I think we can be. But we got to preach optimism and not just austerity. We need to preach the optimism of capitalism and growth. I think we can do it. I thank you all for being part of it. Thank you.